Welcome to the Pulse Check podcast.
Thank
Today, David Wang, the founder of krip, we will for sure talk about. But first of all, welcome, David. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And you already know that I typically start with the icebreaker. So, David, is there something unique about you that maybe not everyone knows, but that maybe defines you, tells us a bit more about you and yourself?
Sure. So one thing I think my colleagues or folks who I've worked with may not actually realize is I'm actually a very musically inclined person. I've actually been trained classically in piano. I played the trombone. I was in a cappella group, so music has actually been most of my life. It has been a primary stay. But it was just not something that ended up being my career. But it's still very much part of me. So actually a lot of things I do revolves heavily around creativity now at krip. And I actually see that influence. A lot of times you bring in those elements of not necessarily music, but creative art side of things. And so, yeah, I know it might seem odd, like a former banker, private equity guy, but yeah, music plays a very big part of my life.
Yeah, that's very interesting to hear the creative side of you, and I'm sure we will come back to that in the conversation just now. But that's something I always regret, that I didn't really learn any instrument, even though I tried a few. Coming more to your career so far, and I saw that you started in investment banking, and then you ended up being a startup entrepreneur. How did that go?
Well, I think I've always had that entrepreneurship gene, So I went to Michigan for university, and I actually started a student club there, mainly focused on helping students find their path in their life, because you see a lot of students jump into investment banking, private equity, trading, whatever, without actually knowing what those career fields are about. So I started this club to mainly just introduce these career paths to folks. But what I wanted to emphasize is the satisfaction that you get from running a club that actually managed to help people, to actually see students come to you and say, thank you for pointing me in the right direction. That was that's a level of satisfaction you get that you don't really get that from, say, just monetary gains, right? This is something that you feel has actually you've actually contributed to somebody's life. So I've always yearned for that feeling again. And so, yeah, you learn a lot from investment banking and gain a lot of skills, but I've always wanted to do something that would be impactful to people, to the society, to communities. So that was what led me to launch krip. Ultimately, it's about bringing a positive change to people's lives.
Yeah, let's come a bit to krip, and I like the point you make in terms of giving also back to society. And when I came to Hong Kong, I did realize that people are really crazy about having multiple credit cards and going after all the rewards programs. And it's funny because in Switzerland, credit cards never really boomed as much and weren't as successful, and only during COVID even just debit cards were slowly picking up, but not to a level as here in Hong Kong. So tell us a bit. First of all, I understand krip is kind of a centralized credit card deals and offer platform. So maybe you can quickly introduce, and then I would love to hear why you came up with that idea in Hong Kong.
Sure. So in short, what we've done is we've aggregated all of the deals and offers that are offered by credit cards into a single place. So what we mean by that is, especially in Hong Kong and Asia, when you have a credit card or a certain payment tool, you're actually offered hundreds, if not thousands, of discounts, deals, buy one, get one frees, cashbacks at a variety of different merchants. So these are basically merchant offers that you get with your payment tool. And because, as you mentioned, there's so many cards in the market, consumers are actually they face a very strange issue here, which is they're spoiled by choice, right? So they have access to so many deals, but the banks haven't done a great job in creating an infrastructure that allows customers to find out that they have these deals. So we created an aggregated platform where we've centralized all of these deals into a single platform, making it easier for consumers to find these deals, but to also actually help other businesses who can leverage these deals to drive their business to tap into this database of deals as well. And actually, to your point, which is a very valid one, this is a very Asian, I guess, issue. It's not really an issue. It's like a characteristic of the Asian cards landscape, right? So in Europe, the reason why it hasn't really taken off, of course, is that the interchange fee, which is that fee the credit card companies charge per transaction, that's actually capped in Europe. So in a way, the banks don't actually get that much money out of each transaction. They don't earn a lot. So in a way, they can't then offer any incentive because there's not much for them to offer, right? In US, it's actually a very profitable business, but in US, consumers are very geared towards points, which you can then redeem for things. Not to say that Asia doesn't care for points, but you have to understand in US, in one country, you have multiple airlines, different miles programs, a lot of different hotels. So with your single credit card, you can redeem for all kinds of flights, all kinds of hotels. But say we're Hong Kong, we're only given the option of Asia Miles for the most part, right? Because there's only one carrier in Hong Kong. Same thing in Singapore with Singapore Airlines. So points game isn't so developed in Asia, and I also think the consumers are generally more price sensitive, so they want to see, genuine savings on each transaction. So that's how these deals came about.
Yeah, that's an interesting one in terms of savings and optimizing. So looking again at krip as a platform, maybe you can tell me the amount of credit cards again. How many credit cards do people typically have in Hong Kong? What is it estimated?
So the average number is about 3 to 4 cards, but that's
cards.
Just going off of the statistics, right? But on average, I think we're genuinely seeing about close to 5 plus.
And then if you use your app, you can see all the credit cards you have and basically the rewards you could get.
Yeah,
Does it incentivize then the people to do certain transactions, or what's the...
Yeah, so if you say you have 6 different cards from 6 different banks, trying to find out deals that you have access to with these 6 cards is going to be finding a needle in a haystack. So we've created that simplified journey where you can come on our platform, you can put in your cards without entering any confidential information, point and click, and then you find out all the deals that your card has access to. So, just for example, let's say you're about to go on holiday and you don't know if any of those cards have airport lounge access, right? So you can come on our platform, you can find out what lounges you have access to. Or if you're going out for a meal with your friends or family, you can also come on our platform to find out which restaurants have deals. And what we've actually found is that typically people actually spend 41% more when they have the option of a deal, typically speaking. And anecdotally, the way this works is, imagine if you're with a group of friends, say like a group of 4, you're out eating somewhere in Hong Kong for dinner, celebrating something, and your bill comes out to, let's say, $700, right, for 4. And if you knew that there was a credit card deal where you can get 20% off if you spent $800, more often than not, people would just top up that bill to $800 to get that 25% discount. So when faced with a deal, people actually do spend a little bit more. So that's what inherently krip is looking to do. A, we're trying to help consumers optimize their way of spending to tap into these deals that they have access to, and B, also to help retail businesses get that business flow from the deals that they have already curated. These are deals that are existing in the market, so let's make them get the visibility that they deserve and help actually drive the business.
So tell me then, it makes a lot of sense, but why do the big banks not offer a better view on this, a better rewards and loyalty program? Let's say the big 3 here in Hong Kong, where I'm banking with one of them. So I struggle to even find on the app of that bank of what actually deals I would have, and I have a few credit cards of that bank alone, right? And then of course I see the aggregator as another potential that of course banks will struggle to offer. But if it's just that credit card or those credit cards from that respective bank, I wouldn't have that view. Why do you think they fail to deliver what you can?
I think it's a infrastructure challenge, right? I think a lot of the Hong Kong banks were very well developed back in the 80s, 90s, and the trouble is a lot of their technology is still from that era. And so their infrastructure hasn't been upgraded enough to accommodate for the modern way of consuming information, right? So when we work with the banks, what we actually often find is that there is a disconnect internally against what the consumer experience should be. So what that means, for example, is a bank might have 5 or 6 different teams, all actually working towards the same goal, right? They're very goal aligned, but their processes are not. And so they craft different deals from different teams. They're all great deals, right, that benefit the ultimate customer. But their focus is on the end goal of creating those deals, not on the actual user experience or the customer experience. And so as a customer, when you actually go and look for these deals, you have to go to these 5, 6 different segregated, decentralized locations to find these deals. And solving for that is actually not so easy, because you have to inherently rebuild the entire infrastructure. And I think that's the main challenge facing most banks with adopting new innovation is because their infrastructure is built such a long time ago that if you need to rehash everything, you have to literally rebuild it from the ground up, and it's expensive and also involves a lot of potential risks, right? So that's why we haven't seen, I guess, the pace of innovation, at least for solving for credit card deals, that we think to get to where it needs to be, right? And we solve for this by creating a layer on top. So we don't look to actually change or fix the fundamental issue, because it's very difficult to do that. It's certainly not within our realm of capability to do that for all the banks in Hong Kong, right? But we take what's there and we make an optimized solution on top, and that's the I think given the constraints, I think that's the best solution for the moment.
I wonder how often as a customer you even switch credit cards, go for a new one. Me, naturally, again, I'm not so into the rewards and loyalty, but once I have it, and of course I tried then also the new virtual banks and have various credit cards there, but then I stick and use the ones I have. Do you have any view, statistics of how often people in Hong Kong change credit cards? Is it once a year, every few years? How often is that?
Well, actually, funny enough, most people in Hong Kong actually love changing cards. So you're a great customer that the banks would really value. So actually in Hong Kong, there is a very big focus put on issuing new cards. So actually, unlike, for example, the States, where a number of banks, they would just focus on their core portfolio of cards and they just continue to refine that over time. In Hong Kong, it's always been about issuing new cards and to recapture their audience, if you will. And they might do that by creating a new segment that they want to target, or just retargeting the same segment from a card from maybe just a couple of years ago. So in Hong Kong, actually, on an annual basis, you'll see about 900,000 new cards issued every single year.
Wow.
It's a lot. And the actual ironic part of it is about 85% of those cards don't actually renew. So the churn of cards is actually about 85%, which means people are just getting new cards all the time. And so for the banks, it's actually a very costly exercise, right? Because you have to go and acquire each new credit card customer, even if it's an existing customer from like 3-4 years ago. Because a lot of these cards, the way they get you to sign up is to offer incentives and welcome offers, right? Which in and of themselves are already quite expensive, right? Usually measured in thousands of Hong Kong dollars. And the qualification to get that incentive is actually, for the most part, as long as you haven't used the bank's credit card for a year. Which means even if you were a customer a year ago and you stop using their card, you become a new customer. And so the banks are effectively having to pay these acquisition fees every couple of years to re-engage what we would consider existing customers, right? So it's quite odd, and that's where I think the deal side becomes very critical, because a lot of the strategy to acquire new customers is focused on, like I said, the incentives, right? It's like, I'll dangle, $1,000 voucher or a certain amount of miles to get you to sign for a new card. That's nice and good, but what's the actual reason I'm getting this card for? What's the value proposition of this card? Does it bring me long-term value, right? That message actually gets lost in the entire marketing campaign. So where we think we can add a lot of value, and we have, is helping the banks actually position their cards to say, look, these are incentives for you to apply for the card, but for the card itself, this is why you should get the card, because it gets you the best deals for dining, for travel, for whatever, right? And once you actually acquire the customer, then make sure they know about those deals long term, so that they can stick with you and become a loyal customer, like yourself, so that you don't go around switching cards all the time, because that becomes very expensive for the bank.
Yeah, and it's also probably they want that I just stick. That's why it's sometimes very annoying. You have to go to a branch and then you have a lot of paperwork. If it's all digital and on your mobile and you see immediately comparison, hey, by the way, your credit card program even expired. This happened to me in the past, that I went to a branch for another reason and that they told me, hey, by the way, your credit card is so old, that program doesn't exist anymore and there are better ones for you. And also when it comes to using all the loyalty points, I typically let my wife use all these points and do whatever she wants to do it. But if I would have it all on my fingertip at the mobile app and see, hey, there's, by the way, if you invite your clients to a certain restaurant and so on, you could use these rewards and so on. I for sure would do it. It's just that the process is cumbersome.
So you raise a good question, and one I'm actually quite keen to find out, which is, for those who are not so into these deals, rewards, points, is that because it's just too difficult to understand and to use, right? Because a lot of folks are disengaged. Some of them may genuinely not have an interest in this. That's fine. But the question actually is, it's just the process is just too complicated.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, of course, the virtual banks that came with a much more modern platform, obviously, they immediately also push messages in a sense, hey, you have now cash back because of that transaction and so on. You immediately get bombarded with positive information of what actually you now gained with doing a transaction, while with the older banks, you have to find out almost yourself that you actually gain points and you can use them here and so on. And that's where definitely, I mean, you hit the nail on its head, that there is a gap in the market to address, even for the ones that are not just always chasing those rewards.
No, I agree. And so that's what we found out as well, right? It's just, if you make something easy for people, nobody's going to turn down free stuff.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
So our mantra is always, krip is effectively helping you find that extra $10, $20, $50 on the table. No strings attached. It's yours. So take it, right? And most people would, except the banks haven't made that easy. And it's actually like we just talked about, right? The focus on acquisition is actually affecting them from a cost side. But then one thing they also have to understand as well is that as a average consumer, my day-to-day contact with a bank is very minimal, right? I wouldn't really engage with a bank unless I need to take money out, pay for bills, make a transfer, take out a loan. But a lot of these things are not frequent activities, right? So your best point of engagement with your customer as a bank is actually through these deals, through these cards, because otherwise I wouldn't go to a bank randomly and ask for a loan, right? So if you're trying to sell me more products like loans, mortgages, saving accounts, whatever it might be, the best way to do that is to engage me first on a day-to-day basis. I can actually see that, hey, Bank A gives me a lot of value every day on my spending, right? So in my head, there's that brand awareness. I tie this brand to day-to-day value. And then when you say, hey, look, would you like to get a tax loan, for example, for the tax season? I'll be like, hey, yeah, this bank seems to understand my needs, etc. Versus a bank that I have no engagement with, and then they're like, here's a tax loan. You're not going to even care, right? You're just going to wave it off. So I think sometimes bank needs to understand that daily engagement is quite important as well.
Yeah, this brings me also a bit to maybe also forward looking towards the future and where this journey goes. Of course, everyone talks about AI, artificial intelligence. And I wonder myself if I have a credit card. I mean, the latest capability apparently that some of these banks have is, hey, we can increase your credit card limit now because they realized, okay, maybe salary has gone up or there's more cash on bank. And that's great because even that was typically a very cumbersome process. You had to go and call up and fill out a lot of paperwork. So meanwhile, the credit card limit can be increased fairly easy. But there's no other things like what you explained that, hey, by the way, there's different maybe credit card options available, different loyalty and rewards programs we just launched. And for sure, there might be some emails or whatever sent to me that I ignore, but definitely not on the application you use on a daily basis. And if this would be much more personalized, also to an extent, hey, we see that you're traveling quite a lot, so definitely these rewards make more sense. Or you're interested in sport, you're running or football or whatever it is, so you may want to go to watch certain games and enjoy these programs. There's nothing so far what I see really tailored towards my needs. Where do you think this journey could go with AI?
No, I think you hit the nail on the coffin as well here, right? It's about the personalization. And when we say personalization, we're talking about genuine hyper-personalization, right? It's not, a lot of the personalization now, it's actually based on customer segments or customer cohorts, which worked very well for the last 10, 15, 20 years. But I think now as information becomes so much more, there's just so much information in the market. As a user, you want hyper-personalization. You want the brand or the product or the service to actually understand you and what you want and what you care about. And so banks need to understand that. And the best way to engage with the customer is to be that bank that actually understands the customer's needs, ideally before they even know, right? So, for example, if if they're able to look at my credit card spending record, they should understand the kind of stuff, the kind of merchants I like to engage with, right? So for example, if you are keen to support sustainability brands, for example, then they should understand that and hopefully push deals that are in that space that you care about, right? So I think for sure banks need to work towards that goal of just providing that kind of user experience, and that requires quite a lot of different moving components to work as one. Which, going back to what I mentioned at the start, that's obviously a big challenge for the banks. But I do think the most critical piece of that is data, right? To actually make use of data, and I think there's a lot of potential here because obviously banks have a lot of transactional records of your spending, but also as HKMA opens up the API framework for open banking, that would also allow the banks to leverage each other's data as well to hopefully create even more sort of comprehensive user journeys. So I completely agree. I think that's where it should be headed, and I think like you say, the virtual banks have done a much better job in that regard, but it's still not to that point, right? So I think that's the direction we're all headed. So yeah, I think banks need to plan ahead and understand the roles of data and how it can all sort of form a critical piece of the user journey.
Yeah, and I have a joint account with my wife, and I would appreciate if they would give me some tips for a gift. It's soon Christmas, and maybe they can look into the transactions that I anyway also see as
maybe you wouldn't want that.
Maybe you don't want that. That's also a good point. So is there one or two elements you think that will definitely be a game changer then in the next few years? Of course, AI in general, but do you expect any big movements in Hong Kong specifically, or maybe also in the region when it comes to loyalty rewards, credit cards in general?
Yeah, I think in Hong Kong for sure, there's definitely a move towards personalization. We're starting to see that some of the banks are starting to offer that. A lot of banks are starting to find ways to, in essence, modularize their cards or their deals, where the user actually has a say in what they can get. But as I said, I think it will move closer and closer to the true, genuine personalization. And I do think that data is increasingly playing a more important role in a lot of these decision making and product development side. I guess I would just want to see maybe a faster pace of that. I think a lot of the banks are working in the right direction, but it's the execution side, right? So I think that's where they need to cross their internal hurdles to make sure that gets done faster to meet the customer demands.
So the modularization is actually a very interesting one, because again, I would love to on the app just see, okay, there could be new components. Why even changing the whole credit card? Maybe there's just a reward I could activate or another one I don't need. I mean, it's so complex meanwhile, and maybe certain things they put together for a certain segment doesn't work for me. So I would love to see that. So I think what you mentioned before is that also HKMA, the regulator in Hong Kong, is pushing with, of course, open banking, that there is more innovation. I also feel there could be done more by virtual banking, of course, help to some extent. So maybe then back to the last question in terms of krip, what specifically to come for krip? How does it help the banks then in the future if they work with you, and maybe also where do they even find you?
Yeah, so what we want to play in terms of the role that we want to play in this space is to actually help the banks engage their customers better, right? We're here to help optimize that process. And so right now it's about getting access to customers, but as we think sort of long term, it's again about how data can facilitate the banks to do better. So we actually have two sets of data, if you want to call it that, right? So as I mentioned, the centralized deals database, that in and of itself is already of a lot of value to a lot of the banks, because a lot of the wastage in deals and reward space as well is sometimes the banks are actually working in silo. They don't actually understand what their competitors are doing, and so they're just crafting strategies that they think works, which is the right thing to do, right? But then the bank starts duplicating each other because their strategy probably may have similarities, right? So that creates a lot of wastage and inefficiencies. So our database can effectively help them understand what their competitors are doing and then find their own way to carve out their niche. But then thinking more along the personalization front as well, is the other data set that we collect through our application, through our API, is customer metadata. We actually get to see what customers are looking for in terms of deals, the merchants they're kind of looking at, the districts they're looking at it from, what kind of cards they have on their profile, which actually paints a very interesting picture for two reasons. Number one, credit cards actually say a lot about a person's lifestyle or socioeconomic background, right? So based on that, you can actually understand what the upper middle class care about deals-wise, or what the working class cares for. And then by looking at what their preferences are, you can then map your deal strategy accordingly based on what kind of customer segment you actually want to target, and then feeding those deals back to the customers, as we mentioned just now, for the personalization part, right? And then through those data, the long-term vision here that we really want to create is to really connect retail and financial services ultimately, is because we're working with a lot of deals, a lot of the merchant and the retail side. And as I said at the start, they're looking for visibility. They work with credit cards because credit cards have network, they have scale. And so they want to benefit from that. And so they carve out these deals. But actually a lot of the inefficiency from this process is actually the curation of the deal process itself. Like a deal doesn't actually get done, with a snap of the finger. It actually takes time. And by the time that deal gets done, it's already out of context. It's already no longer popular. We actually saw that during COVID. Right, a lot of the deals that came out were 3 months after the new policies came out. So you would see a takeaway when dinner was already back on. So we want to help create a much more seamless deal creation process as well, so that banks, retails can work collaboratively together in a very seamless way, so that they can respond to customer needs and demands almost on a real-time basis, so that you actually are giving the genuine value that each individual user is looking for. And I think that's the ultimate, the benefit of having a digital ecosystem, right, to foster those kind of values. So that's where we see our value is in this ecosystem, and we're working tirelessly towards it.
Absolutely, and it's all about data, as you said, in the end. And if you could upsell even other banking or insurance products, even due to some of the transactions you see. For example, okay, you're traveling quite a bit. Do you need also travel insurance? Of course, embedded finance, embedded insurance, we already see when you actually then book a ticket, but maybe there is also, based on your credit card transactions, elements you find and could offer other products. So very interesting space to watch. So I'm sure we will hear about you, David, but also Krip more often. And I'm using the app now, so maybe I will change my credit card more frequently thanks to you. So definitely there is a lot of value in it. So thank you once again, David, for joining the Pulse Check podcast. And with this, please like and subscribe and follow us.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.